right, let's cut your apron out. This is a yard of canvas style fabric. You can use whatever type of fabric you want. The hardier the fabric, the hardier the apron. You can even make this out of a shower curtain, which I plan on doing. This is a doubled over two-piece because we're going to need 2 of each pattern piece. On this particular pattern, grain line is not terribly important, but you'll want to keep in mind that the selvage, the edge of the fabric, should align with the length of the body. It should be parallel with the length of the body. I'm going to put the body pattern on the selvage side, and on the other side of the fabric where the fold is, I'm going to use my pattern piece that is on the fold like this, and then like this. I don't have quite enough camera space, so we'll do one at a time. Make sure that you're nice and flat, you don't have any wrinkles. Highly recommended to press or iron your fabric before you do this. And of course, you can always fold, then fold it like this to get 2 folds at once, and then you get the most accurate cuts. Definitely find something to use as pattern weights. These are marble samples, but you could use a mug, your iron. Get creative. A book. There you go. Now, I highly recommend having a cutting mat and using rotary cutters. Everything just goes so fast. Be sure to pull away the extra fabric before you pull away the pattern, just to make sure you have released the pattern. And there we go. We have 2 layers. Now if you want to line it, you'll need another layer. And that will make it reversible if you want, so keep that in mind, that if you make the other side a different fabric, you can turn it around. Okay, now, for the pockets, this is the fold of the fabric. So I'm just gonna stick this here, put a couple pattern weights on there, and away we go. Remember, if you're lining it, you'll want to do extra pocket pieces as well. That's 1. And I'm gonna use the cut line from before, so don't waste any. There you go. There's the second pocket. Alright, so let's sew the apron. The supplies that you'll need are your cutout pattern pieces, straps that are 12 inches long by, in my case, 1 inch, but it needs to fit in your bias tape maker. This one's a 1 inch one, so that's why we have 1 inch strips, and your crafter's leash or a pair of snips. First, you'll want to make your strips into straps. And you'll do that using your bias tape maker. Load your bias tape maker by pushing this bar part down and your strap in, and then you'll see the little channel here in the middle. You'll grab a pin and just push that through as much as you can, and then fish it out from the other end. You're also welcome to just make one long strip and cut it into 12-inch increments if you'd like. That's easier for you. All right, so I've started to pull this through, and it's folded it over on itself. And if you feel like you like it to be as crisp as possible, you're welcome to press that first. But I'm going to just feed it out of the machine right through the sewing machine. So start by folding it over. Pull it out of the machine about an inch or two, and then start by folding it over, and then you can start. Do a stitch forward, stitch backwards, and then you're going. So hold it sideways like this, pull it out as much as you feel comfortable doing at a time, tuck in the centers, continue folding it, and sewing along the very edge. Do an edge stitch. If you do decide to do this in one long strip and you are joining pieces together, take extra care because those are a little harder to get through the machine. It might take a little bit of practice. And there, almost to the end, as you'll see. Just tuck in those ends. Repeat that for all 4 straps. And when you're done, take the end of one side of the strap. You can trim off the little bits. Wait. Fold it once, twice, just once, however much you want. And then just carefully, since it's so thick, you might want to hand walk. Back tack 2 or 3 times to keep it. And there you have it. Trim the and you have a finished end to a strap. Step 2, you want to hem the pockets. If you have liner, you'll have 4 pockets. If you're doing a liner or reversible, you'll have 4 pockets. If you're just doing one side, you'll have 2 pockets. So for me, I've got 2 in this fabric and 2 in this fabric. The hem on these pockets is 1 inch. So what we're gonna do is a 1/2 inch twice turned hem. It's a 1/2 inch twice turned hem, which makes up an inch. 2 1/2 inches turned twice, 1 inch. If it's easier for you, you can use a ruler and fold it over, measuring as you go, and press it, iron it, and then you can turn it and iron it again. If you're like me, you can just finger press it and then top stitch it. See how you got a crease right here? Just keep doing that all the way across. Finger crease, finger crease. If you don't have a clear ruler, you don't need to have one, but I highly recommend it. Now that's probably enough. You can keep going if you want, but then you just fold it over and then top stitch it down as an edge stitch. It can be right on the edge, it could be about 1/8 of an inch in, it could be 1/4 of an inch in, whichever you like. I prefer an edge stitch. It's about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. Back tack. Back tack at the end. And there you go. Top hem of the pocket is finished, and repeat that for all pockets. Now, make sure that on each pocket the center is marked. If you cut this pattern piece on the fold, you might have a nice crease line. If you don't, mark it with a pin or chalk. And find the center by folding it in half. You can finger press to give yourself a little crease to go by. Do it all the way across if you feel like you need a line to follow, or you can just do it on either end so you have a starting and ending place. Finger creases are always nice too. And then you can also just like mark somewhere in the center for yourself, which you can also do with a ruler, or you can eyeball it. Okay, do that one. This one has a nice crease, so we don't need to do that one. This material is an old curtain that was sun bleached, so we're not using the sun bleached side, using the not sun bleached side. And the same for this one. I have a nice crease in the center. So the next step, step 3, is to tack the pockets into place on the body of the apron. So you should do this 4 times. You should have 4 apron bodies. So lay it on there. Lay your pocket pattern piece on your apron. So this is the wrong side of the pocket to the right side of the apron body, so that both right sides are facing up. And then you will just sew the pocket into place at 1/4 inch. The right toe of your presser foot should follow along the edge of the fabric, and just sew around the pattern piece to hold it into place. Turning at the corners. Back tack at the beginning and the end. And if you want to do the next step while you're here, you can sew down the marks you made at the center of the pocket. You can do all these all at once, or you can do it after you're finished adding the pocket, or you can do it while you add the pocket. Back tack at the top, and do an extra back tack at the top, because that's a really high traffic area that gets a lot of wear and tear. There you have it, that's 1. Repeat that for the other 3 pieces. Okay, if you haven't already, during the pocket tacking step, sew your pockets down the center where you marked them, being sure to back tack on the bottom, but extra back tack at the top, because this is a high traffic area and you want to give it lots of strength. All right, now it's time to attach the straps, and you only need to do it on 2 of the pieces. Where you put the straps is up to you. I recommend about a hand's width from the top of your pocket. But after you make one, you may realize that you don't want it there and you want it somewhere else. So it's totally up to you. Customize it to your preference. Just make sure you do it the same on all 4 straps so that they match up with each other, and that you do them on the opposite pieces. So that might get confusing for you. Just make sure that you got it straight, and just backtack over it a couple times, give it some strength. Putting the end of the strap up against the edge of the fabric. Maybe it feels kind of counterintuitive, but it will be like this when it's done. Great. Do the same on the other side. Now, I'm gonna think about this real quick. There we go. All right, let's talk trims. You can totally make your apron into something completely unique and completely your own through trims. You can get trims at Joann or any craft store, but also don't forget that estate styles and secondhand stores always have crazy vintage funky trim, and I have a bunch of trims from places like that that I could show you and tell you how you would go about using them. First off, one of the most common trims that I see at secondhand stores and stuff is this lace trim. Now, the way that it works is pretty outdated. We don't do what it's made for anymore, but it can totally be used as a trim anywhere that you want. You just can get creative with it. If you're gonna put it on the pocket, it needs to be put on the pocket before you attach it to the body. But if you're gonna do it around the edge, say, you could do it on the pocket before or after. It's up to you on this, but this is something that is just top stitched on, say, the edge, say across the pocket, something like that. I'm not using that today, so I didn't do it. Another very common vintage trim that you might find in a secondhand store is rickrack, or maybe you have some. This is some really interesting rickrack. It's like embroidered. And you would do the same thing with this rickrack as you would do with that lace, is you would put it on as a trim before you sew the pocket on, or around the edge after. You can do that too if you want. And then you can do the same thing with ribbon if you feel like it. Next is like actual lace trim, like lace that comes off the edge. Looks like this. It's got ruffles and then the essential bit, or it's just like a lacy bit like this. So in a lacy bit like this, if you ask me, you're gonna have to attach it in the seam on this side because it's more consistent. This side, there's like holes, right? And this looks like that might be the edge anyways. So you'll want to sew something like these into the seam. And you can, you're certainly welcome to tack by just doing bub-up, 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 all the way around so that it's where you want it, or you can just sew it on like I did the edge here. Always make sure that you have enough trim before you start sewing it on, because see, I only have a little bit, and you could, if you wanted to, just do a little bit like that. It's pretty cute. To do an end, just fold it under like that, and there you go. Easy peasy. And then you can use up little bits of, you know, ruffle and trim like I have here in really unique and interesting ways. For this one, here, make sure that you always put the edge that's sandwiched between the layers up against the edge like this, or like this. It's a little counterintuitive, but the ruffles go towards the center, right? Because then when you turn it out, it will look like that. Very neat. Last trim that I'm going to go over today is called piping. Piping you can make yourself or you can buy it. It's often found in secondhand stores as well. Piping is a little trickier, and you might need a special foot for it if you want to get it as tight as possible. I'm going to use piping today, so you'll get to see how that goes. I'm going to use this black and gold piping because this brown clashes with this brown. You may not be able to tell in the video, but I can see it in real life that it don't look good. So it is important that you attach the piping and line up this stitch that's right next to the cording with where your seam allowance line is. So you can use a a ruler to do this. My stitch line is going to be in 1/2 of an inch from the edge. So when I attach this, and I'll see where, I just want to put that cord right on the other side of that 1/2 inch line, on the inside of the garment. And so to me, that's about 1/4 of an inch from the edge, because the seam allowance of the piping is only 1/4 of an inch. So you'll need to, and it might be easier for you to attach it first. You can also just pin it and sew it when you sew the two pieces together. It's up to you, whatever's easiest for you. But again, we're not using that brown. We're using this gold and black, because I have used the black thread. So that's consistent throughout. And when you finish piping, what you do is turn it to the side like that. So I can get another end to show you when two pieces come together. See that? At one place, you're just gonna have to have that little M right there. And that's okay. That's totally okay. That's how you do it. Now, want to make sure, like I said, that you have enough piping to go all the way around the seam that you want to put the piping in. So, just like this. This is called walking. Walk your piping around your pattern piece, just like so. And even if we can only do it on one piece, I'm gonna do it on one piece. So I know I have enough to do both, but that's how that works. So let's attach the piping. And you only need one thread of piping for each piece. It goes right between the two layers, and then you can fold it over to get a look of what that's gonna look like along the edge there. It's pretty cool. Right? Okay. So this piping, like all piping, is about 1/4 of an inch. As you get farther along in making stuff, you'll realize that 1/4 of an inch to 3/8 of an inch is more common amongst newer patterns. Okay, so we're gonna use that technique I told you about. The seam allowance is 1/2 of an inch. But the piping goes like about there, so it's about 1/4 of an inch from the edge, and you can certainly eyeball that if you want, or you can measure it all the way. In school, they made us learn to eyeball, so I have to, basically, now. So, there we go. So, I'm going to I'm just gonna sew it on first, and then I'll sew the two pieces together. In order to do piping, you need a zipper foot or a cording foot. Either one will work. I'll show you what both of the feet look like. So this is a zipper foot. And then you might need two different cording foots, depending on your skill level and how you want to do it. Let's see if I can find. Yep, there we go. Okay. So here is the zipper foot. It's got like two little toes, very skinny, very close together. Or you have a cording foot. Let's see if I can hold them both at the same time. And if you look close, you'll see there's like a little notch out of those toes. And that notch is on either side, because that's where the needle goes. So you can get the needle right up against the cord. So if you're going to sew it on like this, from this direction, you'll need this cording foot that has the notch. But if you were putting it on the other direction, you'd use the other side. Whatever you prefer. So I'm gonna use this one. That's what I prefer. Change the foot. But you don't have to do this. You don't have to put any trims on if you don't want to. Make it as easy or as hard as you want. Just skip right over this. You don't need any special feet to make this. Okay. So I'm leaving this extra bit off because it's unraveling and it doesn't look nice. So there we go. Okay, careful around corners. They're a little tricky, but you got this. It's much easier to put piping on a curved corner than it is on a square one, so keep that in mind. But look how nice it looks once it's done. I'm just gonna snip that off there. And if you want, do it to the center, although if you're new to sewing, I don't recommend it because we have to do special things that you might not feel comfortable with. So I'm not going to do it so that I can show you the best that I can. But I am going to put more piping on this other side. Right. Step 6 is to sew the shell to the liner. Put the right sides together and make sure that any trims and straps are inside. Okay. And to keep it from sliding around and doing weird things for you while you are sewing, line up the corner edges and somewhere in the middle, pin, and do that on both corners. Make sure that you got them lined up and pinned. Sometimes the piping is kind of pulling, so you can pull it straight, make sure it lines up, and pin it so that you don't accidentally lose any length while sewing. And make sure that it lays flat. If there's a little extra on one side, that's okay. Just make sure that you're not getting any bubbles. That's why it's really important to pin. Okay. Start around the edge. Still use, if you have piping like me, keep your cording foot on and make sure that you sew right up against your cord. That's your seam allowance. You don't even have to worry about it anymore. You just need to make sure that you're getting as close to the cord as you can. And if you want to stop and check your work, there you go. It's always good to stop and check your work because if you are making a mistake, you want to stop and correct that mistake before you get too deep into that mistake. Okay. It's okay if you don't do it like great. You can go back and correct it. So it's starting to bubble and you can like pull the fabric to hold it nice and taut while it, there you go. And just remember, cording can be really difficult, so just be kind to yourself. See here that it's way different, but it's okay, it's fine. Sometimes fabrics just get stretched out in different directions or because of the piping. It's just, do not worry about it. Alright, so we had a lot of shifting. See how there's a lot extra here on this side? So let's double check by turning it right side out and just see how everything looks. But anyways, looks great. Looks fantastic. I'm not gonna worry about it too much if it lies flat. So pull out all the bits. Looks great. Looking fabulous. Okay. So after you're done sewing the cording on with the cording foot, the piping on with the cording foot, change it back to a regular foot. And prepare your neckline by laying it out flat, smoothing it, and getting it pinned. Pins are your friend, pin to your heart's delight. And neck seams. Neck seam allowances need to be smaller because they need to have less pressure on them so that they'll bend around your neck. So they're about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, which again is the edge of the right toe of the foot, back tack. And as you can see in this example, my light colored fabric is a little thinner than my dark colored fabric, but just use the light colored fabric as your guide. And sew around the neck seam, making sure that you're catching the other side if you can't see it. If you are a little worried about this being super close to the edge, go ahead and do the seam again. See how tight that is? And flipping this inside out will be a bit tricky. Get all your pins out. Clip your edge. Clip the corner here. Just go a little bit in with your snips along the seam allowance, and that reduces any sort of tension or pressure on that seam and makes it lay nice and flat when you turn it right side out. Just do it like every 1/4 of an inch, however many you want. There you go. And then it's time for step 8, the flip and press. The farther that you can get inside, the easier it is to pull things through. So try to reach as far in as you can, grab a little bit and pull. Just hit a certain point where you're like, okay, there it goes. In this case, you can pull on the piping to kind of pull it out, but you can also use a chopstick. Here's my chopstick, and here's my opening. So I'm gonna make sure that I've got the opening. And you can use the pointy end or the more thicker end, depending on what works for you. Stick it in the hole, and then you can get it all the way to the edge, and then you can kind of poke. This works for anything, any corner that you are turning right side out. Poke. But if you're using the pokier side, the smaller side, and it's a more delicate fabric, be careful. Poke right through the fabric. If that's too hard for you, you can leave an opening somewhere else, but then you'll have to top stitch that in. So there you go. Now do that to the other side. This is one side of the apron. Boom. Okay, top stitch. Roll the two fabrics between your finger until you've got it as flat as possible, and then just 1/4 inch from the edge, top stitch along the edge. And I didn't do it, but if you want to make sure that you're getting the most attractive top stitch, do it on the side that's lighter. Because it's going to show up, your stitch is going to show up on the side of fabric that is lighter. So. See, it looks great. Top stitch the other side. Again, make sure that you are laying everything as flat as possible. And you do a 1/4 inch from the edge, top stitch on the piping side. With piping,
remember to pull the piping out to get a nice crisp edge. So on all 4 of your neck seams here, I want you to make sure that they're even, right? Even across. So I'm going to eyeball it roughly there. Seam allowance here is 1/2 inch. And line these up like this, right? So a fat half, and if you are a little concerned about this later, your ability to do this, sew at 5/8. I'm going to do 1/2 inch. And you may need to press to get this to happen. So what you're going to do is fold it over 1/4 inch and then fold it over again. See how nice that looks? That's called felling. Be very careful here. Very thick, very slow, possibly hand walk through the ends. Thank you for watching. I hope you make an apron, and if you do, please send me a picture of you in it.